To the February 24th, 2025 special Troy City Council meeting. I will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call from Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Brooks?
Here.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig?
Here.
Councilmember Chanda?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gunn?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
No, you're not, Ellen. So Ellen is not, or Councilmember Hoderick is out of the county and will be appearing via Zoom. We're not voting on anything this evening, but she is here for the discussion portion of it. But I will move that Troy City Council hereby excuses the absence of Councilmember Ellen Hoderick at the special City Council meeting of February 24th, 2025 due to being out of the county.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Gunn, that we approve the excused absence of Councilmember Hoderick as read into the record. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks?
Yes.
Councilmember Chamberlain Craig?
Yes.
Councilmember Chanda?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gunn?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes. Motion carries. Once again, Councilmember Hoderick is here for discussion purposes only, and I will probably forget to call on her. So, Councilmember Hoderick, please call out if you have something to say and I don't see you waving your hand or something. Okay? First up on the agenda is public comment. We have 4 people signed up for public comment. Same rules as council chambers for regular meeting of 3 minutes. There's no opportunity for response from council or administration here. So when you speak and you're done and we don't say anything back, please understand that's just part of our agenda and our rules. I wish the public comment was after the presentation because sometimes questions and comments actually. Can I make a, there are rules, we can change it. Can I make a motion to move public comment to?
Because you don't have all of the members present and voting, it's adding to a special meeting, and so some it would not be.
Not valid?
Yes.
Well, that's a bummer. All right, so options, you can speak 3 minutes now. Other opportunities, if you wanted to watch the presentation first, we do have a meeting at 7:30 with public comment right up front. If you wanted to speak then instead, that would be also allowed. So I will call your name. If you'd like to pass and do it later, let me know. And please speak into the microphone. It's not going to amplify in the room, but it will amplify for the YouTube and the cable channel, and that's what's needed. So first up is Alex Kopacevich.
Good evening. My comment will frankly be short. So at first I'd like to commend council for the really great work that has been done for the library. I plan on, if in the event that the library is put forth to a bond, I will be supporting the library. To that effect though, the amount of discussion and discourse and the number of times in which the library was put forth in front of council was numerous. In fact, it extended over a year, and I'm sure there were conversations that took place well beyond a year. For that reason, I'm here to address council in this evening with the capital projects that are being discussed. When I attempted, as a member of the public who frankly is not even very as knowledgeable as many of the other people who attend these meetings, I tried to educate myself on what are these capital projects, how long have they been discussed, and where is the running list of capital needs for the city of Troy, so that I can understand in terms of the capital outlay that Troy taxpayers are expected to potentially fund, what does the roadmap look like? Now, I understand that, and Mayor Baker kindly replied to a number of emails that I had sent, and there was reference to previous discussion. There was also a January 11th meeting, and that meeting is an annual strategic planning, and there are a number of capital projects discussed during that meeting. However, there was unfortunately no meeting recording and no document that I can see of. Now, I know we're talking about that today and that it will be referenced that this is the beginning of that conversation. But in totality, I understand that we didn't have a city manager for quite some time, but the capital projects being proposed, I truly believe that they deserve a longer and greater degree of discussion. But beyond that, in terms of the governance and process as it relates to capital projects, I would like to see the capital projects go through the same rigor and diligence that the library project went through. Now, perhaps that has taken the place. I have attempted to find this just through Google and using every tool available to me. But that's why I'm here this evening, is that I would like to ask council to potentially take that into consideration as it considers forthcoming bond offerings to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Janice Gerling.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Baker. Thanks for letting me speak tonight.
I originally was going to talk about the library and how the intent of the library being funded, but then I did open up the packet and I went through this in some detail, and I have a lot of other questions and concerns, which I would just like to bring up tonight. Hopefully some of those will be answered. First off, I noted in the opening letter, the tool to fund the capital needs is capital bond debt, a 20-year bond. There's no other discussion, maybe there will be discussion about other options for funding, but to just jump to, we're going to ask the taxpayers for more money, that's a concern of mine. You want to put this on a ballot proposal for the November 2025 election. That's coming up fairly quickly. Again, as Alex pointed out, not a lot of time for people to be aware of the details that are in this, not a lot of time to really investigate possible other options of funding some of these items. You want to limit the need for future ballot proposals. I understand that. There's a process. You have to submit wording to be on the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. We jumped to the end of the document though, I did notice fairly quickly that there was included 13 bond proposals from other cities and the results of those. And I had to ask myself, why would we include those in here? 12 of the 13, which is 92%, were approved, which tells me that this information is going to be used for something. Maybe to convince people, look, we got these, other cities got these approved. We can get this approved. So let's ram it through the voters and we'll get this approved. I don't know many people, when you put the word library or parks or schools on a ballot, they're going to see those keywords jump out at them and they're going to be like, yes, of course I'm going to vote for that. That's really good for our city, right? So concern of mine, if you put the library all by itself, let people vote on that. I don't know many people who are going to turn that down, especially after hearing, I did not take the tour myself, but after hearing about the tour and the needs of the library, I probably would vote for it myself. I did also go through some of the items in here, which was I forgot what you call them, between the red and the green. I think they created some pause for city council is what the verbiage said. And saw some concerning things in here, just to mention a couple. Safety Town, Permanent Safety Town. That's a paid program. Residents pay for that. My daughter attended that. We pay money, $145 as a resident to send our kids to that. Only $10 more for non-residents. Where's the revenue for that? The Troy Farm, that's a park that requires a fee and a membership for use. Again, where's the revenue for that? Lots more.
Back at 7:30.
Lots more questions?
Yeah.
Along those lines.
Very good, thank you. Next up is April Church.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, friends. I'm April Church. I'm the president of the Friends of the Troy Public Library, and we accept that what the bond proposal is up for is beyond our control, and we will support any bond proposal that includes the replacement of the library, provided that what is ultimately approved is commensurate with what the consultants have recommended. I don't want to take a lot of time here, but we do have a few questions we hope you can answer in the course of today's meeting. One, data has been provided regarding the results of past bond proposals in Oakland County. Is there a plan to poll registered voters in Troy to determine their current tolerance for tax increases? The library has clear documentation of the need for a new facility easily accessible on their website. Is there documentation that is or will be easily accessible by the public that supports the other projects that will be included in the bond proposal? And many of the projects listed have their rationale as nearing end of usable life. The library, too, is quickly approaching the end of its usable life. I will argue that the current library facility is past its usable life. What is the plan moving forward if the bond proposal fails? Thank you.
And finally, Jeff Schaefer. All right.
Thank you. I'm going to echo many of the comments that Janice and Alex said. Yeah, we do need a new library, like you said. I totally support that. But I urge that we look at inventive methods be used to try to fund it, because quite honestly, the taxpayers in Troy are stretched financially. I did my taxes, looked from last year to this year, and the increase was substantial, and I'm headly. So people are just not going to have appetite. And if we are going to do a millage, you got to separate them. You can't put them all together. People are going to vote that thing down. Now, when I talk about creative, one of the things, like, for example, is a sale leaseback. That's very common in the business world. Also, maybe have naming rights. I see Kresge Foundation. Possibly they can kick in some substantial amounts of money. Also, the Carnegie Foundation also funds libraries. So start looking for grants and things like that to help out. I want to make a second point really quick. I really do appreciate what I saw in the January 11th capital funding meeting. I saw very serious people talking seriously about the impact of the Troy residences and what is needed and what's needed. But one thing I do want to see, I came out of the business world, and I actually managed capital budgets in General Motors of $1 billion annually. And you have a 5-year capital budget. And what you do there is you say, okay, these are the things that we need. These are the things we got to absolutely positively do. And then this is the things that probably if we have funding we can do, and then you're nice to have. Have a 5-year capital budget clearly laid out, renewed annually, and then you put it out for the people to see. They can see it, they can study it, they can provide impact. So again, I really urge that the library be replaced, inventive ways of financing be done, and because the taxpayers of Troy are financially stretched. Thank you very much.
That concludes those that have signed up for public comment. As I said, we don't reply here now like we do in normal meetings, even though I'm dying to put some good stuff and answer some of your questions.
You can email us.
A lot of it's going to be addressed, I'm sure, by the presenters today, some of those questions. And then, again, 7:30 is going to come fast. We have another meeting if you have more to say. Public comment will be early on. Please, anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. But it's a good opportunity. So we'll move on to the business state and the special meeting notice, which is only one item, U1, the Capitol Conference follow-up. As a reminder, there's no votes tonight. This is not a vote to put anything on the ballot tonight, but there is an ask from management for direction from us or consensus as to how we want to move forward because of the timeline proposed, which I think we'll hear more about. So keep that in mind as we're listening and asking good questions. During the presentations, Frank, my expectation is, I don't know if each person has an opportunity for questions at the end or if you want questions during the presentation, but we might do both because that's how we roll. But
I prefer at the end, but
I know you'd prefer at the end, but sometimes it's so burning. But no, that's fine. And then we'll give everyone at the table an opportunity kind of at the very end to wrap up with some thoughts, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Nastasi.
thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for all being here. I know we've been hitting you guys with a lot of different meetings, so really appreciate your time. I appreciate staff all being here to help answer these different questions, and of course, all the people that spoke and residents here. It's all very important. These are still, I know it's said in the PAC beginning stages, but it is. And we're so big on community engagement, getting that information out to everybody. That's the only way we're going to be successful. And we want 100% to hear back from the community because that's who we're working for and representing as the community as a whole. Back on January 11th, we held the Capitol Conference and we went over our long-term capital needs, assess where we stand financially, and took a look at potential funding options at that time. During that discussion, staff also shared public feedback, many different surveys, which shows support for exploring additional revenue sources to maintain and improve various facilities. Technical difficulties.
Can I blame Ellen? No? Sorry.
So the next one here, Capitol Conference recap. So we have proposed bond assumptions. So the city wants to focus on short-term capital needs, investing in long-term assets. So the goal is to address urgent infrastructure and facility needs while making strategic investments that will serve the community into decades. The next one, the tool to fund the capital need is a 20-year bond, capital bond debt. This allows the city to spread the cost of major projects over time, making large-scale improvements more financially manageable. And the city wants to plan for a ballot proposal for the November 25th election, which is a very, very quick timeline. And staff's been working really hard to get all the information. And that's part of the reason we're here is they put together information on a lot of these capital projects, but you guys wanted more information, and that's, Kurt is going to be going into that where between the two lines, and that'll be coming up soon. Community sentiment assumptions. Troy continues to be state, regional, and national benchmarks. This track record demonstrates the city's ability to effectively manage resources and deliver value to our residents. The next, residents' response are willing to provide additional funding for top priorities such as roads and public safety. That's just two of the top, but there's others, as we'll see as we move on. And investing in these areas aligns with residents' expectations and enhances overall quality of life for all. And it says few residents respond favors reducing our expenditures, and this suggests that residents prioritizing, maintaining, or enhancing city services over actual doing budget cuts, which we're very fiscally responsible with all our spending. Next slide, please. Unless I have to do it here and try. So this is the next one where council wanted more information, especially between the orange and the green, but anything up here, of course, you guys can discuss. We can dig into it more. The assumption was everything above the orange line represented what council agreed should be included in a proposed bond proposal, and the other items wanted further discussion and look into them. So this is the above average facilities and infrastructure priorities. I know it's a 2021 budget survey, so it's a little bit dated, but it's the most recent one we have. And as you can see up here, we have streets, stormwater management, sidewalks, fire station. So you got the public safety, parks, community center, the Troy Library, of course. All these are very important. It's interesting too that the same survey showed that 40% or fewer respondents opposed a tax increase to maintain and improve our streets, public safety facilities, city parks, and city hall. Now this one is above average facility priorities 2022 engagement priority survey, but does not include the library. And what I thought was very interesting about this, so the dark blue is support tax increase. The orange is the citizens need more information, and of course the green is oppose a tax increase. So that shows to me, you know, not only the importance, but the importance of our communications department director to get that additional information, not only on this, but all the proposed capital projects. So we're all on the same page. This one was added, it's a capital project fund balance from 2015 to 2025, it's 10 years. On the left far column, it's in the millions, and you can see back in 2015, it's just under 14. And as we progress, it's kind of a bowl, then it goes back up, but from 2021 onward, it's continually went down, and for proposed for 2025, it's between the 3 and the 4 million. So we have a lot of different capital project needs, but we just don't have the fund balance. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Kurt Bovenseed, our DPW director, to go over some additional information on planned expenditures.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you, City Manager Nastasi. We're going to go through that middle section right now. So it's been about 6 weeks since we held the Capitol Conference, and Council had an opportunity to prioritize all those projects. And that between that red and green line, Council indicated that they needed more information in order to make that decision. So the next several projects are just between that red and green line. So we start off with the map of the entire city, kind of displaying what areas of the city the planned expenditures and improvements would touch. So you can see here that what's being proposed in these projects really have a wide range of projects that would benefit all of the city of Troy. the Parks and Recreation planned expenditures, where these came from is these came from our 3-year capital budget. So these projects currently are in our 3-year capital budget. But I will say, this was taken from our proposed 2025 budget. So these projects currently are not funded. These projects are in the budget, but they will have to go through the entire process this budget season in order to get funded. These are just projects that were proposed in the capital budget. It is very unlikely that you'll see in our current capital budget that we will be able to do $9.5 million with our current funding levels. So again, these projects, they've been in the capital budget for several years, and then we pulled them from the 2025 proposed budget. So this slide demonstrates, our investment into the Parks and Recreation, specifically the capital, and you can see in 2005 it kind of went up, and then it went back down, and it flattened out, and then you see some growth in the later years there, and that growth is primarily due to grants and ARPA funding. So we fully anticipate that we'll start seeing that decline again because those park projects will have to compete with the other infrastructure projects throughout the city. So when we talked in the Capitol Conference, we talked about the Parks and Recreation improvements that weren't already in the capital budget. So these would we call additional expenditures. And the list that was provided during the Capitol Conference, it wasn't a very comprehensive list. It was a lot of things that we pushed out all the way in the 5-year capital. So we met Recreation and the Parks Department met to kind of refine those projects and make sure that we were giving you a list and a list we can substantiate of the different projects that we can go back and point to, okay, this is why we would be doing this project. And I just want to go over a couple of them here. So, of course, we've seen a big demand for pickleball, and we are still moving forward with designing a pickleball courts for Firefighters Park, and council will see that proposal for award in the beginning of April. But I don't think 8 courts will fully meet the demand that we see for outdoor pickleball courts. So this specifically addresses the need that we hear from the public constantly that we need more pickleball courts. Basketball courts are something that we pulled from our Parks and Recreation master plan. So that plan is expiring this year, so it is to be due, but we did see a demand for basketball courts in the Parks and Recreation plan. Safety Town. This one's a little unique. We didn't specifically see something of a safety town called out in any of our surveys. What this is supposed to represent is we hear a lot of comments from our constituents that why don't we have something like Rochester Hills Innovation Hills? Why don't we have something that no one else has around here? So the idea is if we're going to invest into our parks with this bond, is to take at least one of our vacant parcels that we purchased over 20 years ago and put in an investment into those parks and develop something that is really a regional draw that no one else has. Yes, we can put more baseball fields, we can put more soccer fields, but we really believe that if we're going to take funds and develop one of our vacant parks to really do something unique and a draw to the city where people want to come to the city because of it. There is nothing else like what you see in this image in this region. These images are actually mostly from Florida. The comment about the Safety Town program, yes, we do have a Safety Town program, but this takes it to the next level. Right now, they just use Stein Community Park with some cones and some movable signs. This really takes it to the next level. When we proposed this project to the Planning Committee, the excitement out of Chief Hollander was pretty. I've never thought that the fire chief would get excited about a safety town, but he said, if we do this, we need to make sure that there's an area big enough where we can bring the fire truck in and we can do fire safety because we're going to have all the preschoolers there at the safety town. So there was some interesting momentum there when we first proposed this. The Troy Farm, we know that the Troy Farm used to be the senior gardens. It's now become more community gardens, and there's a big demand to expand those community gardens. Our thought there is if we're going to meet that demand, you're going to start getting families with kids to go out and garden at the Troy Farm. So making sure that we have some amenities at the Troy Farm to meet those. So if maybe mom or dad or caregiver is gardening, we have a farm play structure, themed play structure where the kids can go on. So it really becomes a community garden and beyond the gardening itself too. Also with the farm, I will say that we used to have a restroom facility. We had to tear that down because it was beyond repair, so it no longer has a restroom facility. There's a gentleman named Mr. Winter who often advocates for paved parking at their restroom facilities. So hearing those concerns and trying to meet those concerns. Huber Park, again, that's a response from a lot of the users of that park. That park is a natural park here on the Civic Center campus. It's used quite frequently. It has outdoor exercising stations that are pretty dilapidated. It does have some drainage issues because we want to keep it a natural trail and a natural wood chip trail. So we're suggesting $1 million investment to address those drainage concerns and update those workout stations. And then finally, our athletic field improvements. Our athletic fields do need some funds to restore them. We're not suggesting any type of synthetic turf or anything like that. That's just to go out there and do some major maintenance, capital improvements to those fields to make sure that they can stay for the next 10 to 15 years. And I know we did talk about the community center with the planned expenditures. Again, the planned expenditures, that $2.3 million, that'll have to go through this exact same process as with any of the capital budgets. So those are just in the capital budget and have been in the capital budget. A lot of them have been pushed out. And there's a couple examples of the deterioration of the lockers and deterioration of the paint and carpet that we're suggesting needed some improvements. The additional $7 million capital project, that is in response to there's a need for more court time at the community center, whether it be pickleball, whether it be basketball. So that's adding 2 adjoining gyms to accommodate those requests for additional court time, and also including a raised track that can be used by our constituents and by the members of the community center as a walking or running path, much like you would see at a high school. Parking lot improvements, probably not the most favorable to talk about, but they are very important. The city of Troy does have 54 outbuildings, and most of those have adjoining parking lots. This investment of almost $6 million would touch a vast majority of the parking lots throughout the city, as indicated in the map. We do go through and actually rate our parking lots very similar to when we rate our roads. So this is not every parking lot. This is the parking lots that are rated in the good to fair condition, or poor, I should say, the poor to fair condition. So that's resurfacing those parking lots. And then the streets in major and local is the last project in this between the green line and red line. This can get a little confusing when we look at the funding. Right now, the planned expenditures are just over $21 million of capital funds. There is some Act 51 gas tax money, anywhere from $4 to $5 million a year that go into these planned expenditures. But right now, our 5-year capital plan, there's a need for $21.5 million. And we do a good job of planning out what roads would get done with each year's funding, as you can see on the map there. So a lot of roads would be touched with those funds.
Can I think I know you're just as important, but I feel like maybe we should, if there's any questions about any of the things you just did, it might be better to do them right now, if that's okay?
Yeah.
If there's any question. I actually have a quick question. You mentioned the 5-year capital plan. Can you just speak a little bit about, because that came up in public comment, where that exists,
Sure.
what it is? I know it's in our budget documents. We see all of it, but can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so 5-year capital plan, like you mentioned, is in your budget document. It is presented to City Council every year in the special study session as related to the budget, and then it lives in that document every year. Not everything gets a 5-year outlook. Our major infrastructure gets a 5-year outlook. Our other parks and recreation, and they get a 3-year lookout. But all of our infrastructure gets a 5-year lookout. And you can see, if you were to go back and look at those documents, you can see some projects will move. They'll move. Sometimes they'll get pushed out, whether that's because our grant funding got pushed out for that project, or sometimes they'll move up because the grant funding became available faster. So those projects do move year to year, but they're all found in the capital, in the budget document, found online.
Which are all online. Right. Okay, additional questions for Kurt? Councilor Housen?
Thank you for this info. I especially like the chart that shows the capital, Parks and Rec capital spending historically, and how that's been like nothing because of how low our capital millage is, how low our overall tax rate is. And that's really telling. One thing, and I agree with what a lot of the folks that came to speak and emailed us on, that as much of this info as we can have out there in an easily digestible form. A lot of other communities have their capital improvement plan as its own document, and a lot of communities have it all online where, as I mentioned, each project has its own thing you can explore that has more info on it. I know we're on a quick schedule, but I'd like to see all that in here, especially for anything that will be included in a bond proposal and multiple bond proposals. To have that and a lot of detail on it. I like the idea of some projects being more kind of out there, just like, you know, in the dream world of what we could do, versus more that are like we want to do but we're just off funding for them, than projects that are going to get done. So I don't know if I have an explicit question, but can you speak to how, do you have any idea of how we're going to do that right now? And I'm sure we already have plans to do a lot of that anyway, but especially with how you broke it down here was great to start. I have my opinion on how I prioritize even the sub-projects, but what can you speak on how you're going to present that to the public, or what currently we're talking about?
So I think I'll let Courtney speak to the community and how all this information, we've already kind of started pushing a lot of that information out on our social media. So that probably will be a question for Courtney.
Okay.
Simple question, Kurt, thank you, and Frank as well. Will this, I presume, right now this is on the website. We'll quickly have this on after this meeting with that, so folks know where to find this so you can reference it. Is that correct? Okay, thanks, that's it.
Additional questions for Kurt right now?
Just a quick, the last slide, I think, when we're showing the roads, I noticed the Coolidge is missing. Is that because it's in item number 5? That's the main, that's in the top section of the...
That is correct,
okay.
yeah. So
this is the second part of it that...
yeah, so these are the planned expenditures. Coolidge right now is not in the planned expenditures. We'll likely do some minor slab replacement out there. You know, we spend about $500 million, excuse me, $500,000 a year, $500,000 a year on our major roads right now. And so Coolidge would be part of that slab replacement. So, and you know, by design too, you know, it's been a unique budget to put together, to propose to Frank this year, because we have this looming, you know, potential funding mechanism out there. So what should be in this year? What should we push out to 26, 27? So it's been a very interesting budget to put together to propose to city management this year because of that. And for that reason, you're not going to see Coolidge on there, because Coolidge might not get done unless we include it into a bond.
Thanks.
Additional questions for Kurt?
Oh,
Ellen,
yeah.
do you have a question, Ellen?
No questions.
All right, thank you. My only question is, and I kind of know the answer, but not everyone might. I think it was in 2018 or 2019, I forgot, the facilities assessment plan. I know that used to live on the website, and I know it's now 6 years old or so, but can you just speak to what that is, and one of the things that's used is to determine how our
Sure.
buildings and what their needs are?
Sure. That's one thing that we did when the building operations become under the DPW, as I quickly recognized, we didn't have a plan. We didn't know our true condition of our facilities. So we did a facility condition assessment of all, at that time it was 52 buildings, all 52 buildings, to really look at the bones of the building, look at the plumbing, look at the electrical, look at all the infrastructure behind the walls, and try to get an idea, a plan in place to, okay, what is priority today? What is priority 5 years from now? What is priority 10 years from now? To really help us build that capital budget. So when I'm making that request to city management to fund a switchgear replacement that Dennis tells me has to be fixed, because if not, all City Hall will go down, that seems like a pretty high priority. So having that information and having a third party really analyze that for us was very helpful. And I'm not sure if that is on the web. We'd have to check. If not, we certainly can put that.
I think it used to be. I don't know if it still is, but okay. All right. Good. Sorry to interrupt Courtney when she's ready to go up, but I guess we'll go on to the next and we'll come back.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I do not have much of a presentation tonight. I was hoping to have more of a conversation around community engagement, around the proposed bond. I know at the Capitol Conference, we left with the above the line items, which is everything above the green line, and that is something that myself and my team have been working on a communication strategy for. So we are developing question and answers that will be available to the community. You know, we have social media campaigns that were being developed, talking points for council, staff, to put out to the community. But there was also an interest in community engagement on the between the line projects. And as I started to dig a little bit more into that, that is something that we could certainly do, and I have a plan for that, but my concern became confusion around the bond proposal itself. And as we were talking even tonight and listening to some of the questions, I think context on a lot of the projects we're talking about is important. So I can certainly start to put out information regarding, you know, major and local streets and how that would fit into the proposed bond, but then if we're going to add the planned expenditures for streets, what does that look like? And so I want to be able to be transparent and upfront with our community as to what we are talking about for this proposed bond. So I, again, was hoping to have more of a conversation regarding the desire on community engagement and information going forward regarding this. Because we can be ready absolutely to start putting out messaging tomorrow around the proposed bond, but I just want to make sure that we are accurate in our information and that it isn't changing a month from now or 2 months from now, because it is important that the community has information ahead of time. They have time to digest it. We have time to take questions, answer those, and have a long-term community engagement plan in place.
I think that's awesome. I have about 10 years of this stuff stuck in my head. I know Ellen's got a couple of years more than that, Dave's a couple of years less, and I think that's one of the challenges is I can tell you why I think all these projects are critical and why we're here and how we got here, but it's hard for me to communicate that to all of them. I'm meeting Alex on Thursday, so that's the start. That's my first media engagement, right? But I don't know the best way to do that. One, obviously, we have to be on the same page and with consensus moving forward. And then it's difficult. I mean, and I've been trying to think about this too, and I wasn't sure exactly what you were presenting tonight. And it sounds like when you say you want to have a conversation, are you meaning now with us about this, or? Because I mean, I think that's probably the good time for it. I don't know what council thinks and how we do it. I'm obviously for education of everything out there. Get as much information out there. The good news when I read some of the emails I've received and some of the comments tonight is I know we have a lot of all this information already prepared, like the 5-year capital budget on certain things. That already exists, like the budget document showing where our needs are, where we spend everything. So I know a lot of that material is there. The challenge is easily getting, I don't know if it was you, David, who said to have it easily digestible for a resident. Number one, where to find it and how to interpret it without it creating, like our 300+ page budget document, no offense, Rob, is great, but if you can get lost in it really fast.
And we have already discussed plans for this year's upcoming budget on how we're going to break that down, whether there would be a proposed bond or not, but how we would make that information more accessible to the community. So again, it is easily digestible. So that plan is already in place, and we can certainly, again, start to talk about, I know the library has done a wonderful job already with their communication, and they've had community engagement for at least the last year, 2 years, around kind of their facility. So they're a little bit ahead of the game, but regarding a lot of these other projects, I can certainly go out and say it costs X amount of dollars for a new fire truck, and we're X amount of years past our replacement schedule, and we already have that content created, but it's also important to have the context to have context to put it out into the community, so it's not just, oh, I saw this poster, I saw this mailer, that's great information, but how does it apply to me? And so that's kind of what I was hoping the conversation would be about, because if we start talking about these projects and then seeking community engagement on just the in-between the line projects, it can cause confusion, because then are we talking about a proposed, just rounding 1 mil bond proposal, or are we talking about a proposed 1.4 mil? And then you start throwing multiple numbers out into the community, and that's where I fear the confusion could start.
I agree.
If that makes sense.
Wait, so for those who weren't there, we struggled with these lines at our January 11th meeting, whether or not we should have them at all. And some of us were, you know what, I'm good with the green line, let's focus on the green line and above. But there was some hesitation, so we kind of compromised and added the orange line. I think that, but it does become confusing because I look at everything, I'm one of the ones that said the green line is where I'm comfortable because I know everything above the green line is a critical need for our city. And I'm happy to talk about why that is now and in the future. But it is I just don't look at, well, we really need everything above the orange line, it'd be nice to have between those lines. To me, it's everything above the green lines, and that's, so I'm kind of stuck on that, and I don't want to muddy that message, but it sounds like it's kind of a chicken and egg question as well, because you can do posts and information about these projects, but if you don't tell them why they're learning them, they may not pay attention, but if we don't give direction as to what we want to do, then you can't really do the necessary informational campaign, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And just to remember as well, community engagement is extremely valuable, but it also takes time for it to be done properly, so.
Councilmember Kendall, okay.
So I think first, and I'm going to get to that, I think we need a conversation where we're at. I feel like there have been some changes since we first had this conversation, and I admit I'm probably not where you are.
Right.
I'm in a different place, and so I think we need to find consensus around that. But before we get to that conversation, I need a clarification. This is probably for CFO Malzek, is there was actually the good point around having multiple bonds. Can you do that? Can you have a bond that is just a library, a bond that is like Safe Streets, it's the police, the fire, the streets? Could we do that? Is it from a functional perspective?
Right, so when you go to the vote of the people, you have to explain what you're asking for. And so that list of items is going to be in our bond proposal or our language. The second part to your question is, can we do it in different timing? And so in other words, we're not going to spend, if it was 150 million, we weren't going to do one bond for 150 million. We would do it in separate series.
Yeah.
So we might be doing a road project 5 years from now.
Right, I'm aware of that. I think what I was wondering, like, could you have, like, sometimes you have a city and there's multiple,
Yes.
and maybe they have an operating millage and then they have a bond, and that's why it looks like they have multiple millages at once that people are voting on. But I guess what I'm hearing you say is you want break up and have like one bond, like one capital millage for one thing, just a library, and have another, with the idea of you don't want, one thing to hurt the other.
Our last 20-some years ago, we did roads, we did parks, and we did recreation center. So there was 3 separate ones. So you could go to the people with 3 separate
ones.
Because I think the strategy was to include them all, where when you have roads and public safety always score up better than any of the other categories.
But I think what I'm hearing now, and it's good to hear from the public, is, again, we need to start discussing, is library and public safety are different things, and is that going to confuse people by lumping them together? So I'm just, I'm putting that out there, that's what I'm wrestling with. I want it to be as clear to the public as possible.
In terms of communicating to the public, I'm very confident that if this were to be one bond proposal, whether it's above the orange line or above the green line, that we could explain that very, in depth and accurately, and take on all of those questions and explain everything from how much it costs to pave a mile of a road to what is in our proposed capital budget, this year, 5 years from now, and everything in between. It's just having more of a consensus from council as to what projects we should be talking about.
We'll get there. Mayor Pro Tem Bell.
I got a couple points here. First, I looked at all the bonds that have been approved. The larger bonds are all school bonds. The largest city bond approved was 18.6 million. And just hearing some of the feedback from the community, it's kind of like, I appreciate everybody who's involved, but the problem is not enough people spend enough time really researching all this information. They see $100 million, $165 million bond, and are they gonna, like, schools are easy. It looks like very large bonds have been approved. 18.6 million is the max that I have seen approved in this information. So we're gonna tell the community, city wants 165 million, or 100 million, whatever the number is. That's one point. The second thing is, so I've done a lot of development myself, and we're telling the people this library is gonna cost $43 million. I look at the library like they're the investor or they're the bank. We don't have blueprints, we don't have construction costs. How do we know it's 43 million if we don't even have that information back yet? We're just telling them, well, okay, what if there's gonna be overruns? Now what? You know what I mean? How do we know it's 40?
That stuff's coming with this. We approved the schematic plan for that, that's gonna give those numbers to us in May before those numbers be
Before
finalized.
okay.
So just remember that. I don't want
Well,
you
because
to-
I kept seeing 43 million, I kept thinking, how do we know it's 43 million? Right? So I guess that's coming before the bond. And then I kind of guess, I wish I would have seen more of like, what are our other financial options? I get we're not gonna raise 43 million if that's the number for a library. But I hear people say, well, we got 10 million set aside. Is that 10 million gonna go towards the library? What other grants are options? I realize it's gonna be pennies on a dollar compared to the numbers, but just so I could sit down and say, okay, well, you guys, library's gonna be 43, but we got 10, we got another 3 from a grant, you know what I mean? And we heard some other funding options, so I just don't wanna say to the people that talk to me, okay, this is our cost, we need a tax. You know, I can say, look, we have really looked at all the other options, and this is where we're at, you know, to bring it down a little bit. Those are my thoughts. The library to me is what's been worked on so hard and needs to be funded. If it was, I had suggested too possibly breaking it up, because if this goes down in flames, then all that work for the library is for naught, right? Because we wanted these other things. They're great ideas, and I love that safety town one, that's a great one. But I was like thinking when I was a safety patrol, I want to go out there and, you know, but I don't want the library not to get funded because we've added all these other things on. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, and my thought, thanks, Mayor. My thought there is that's where the engagement comes into play. We need to get a sense from the people, like, you know, a lot of people in this room want it split apart, and when we did the bond proposal 25 years ago, we split it apart, and that worked. I guess it's really a sense of what people are comfortable with. If the vast majority of people we engage, if we do a survey and show that they're fine with one proposal, that's the simplest solution, but I'm open to whatever the people are willing to support. I mean, that's really what our job is. Our job is to give the people the facts, let them make the best decision they can. So that's going to be, I'm not going to make that decision now whether we split it or whether we do one. I think we need to engage people and figure out what they're comfortable with. The tens of thousands of voters out there, and not just the people in the room, though I think brought a lot of good points here too. Let's leave that for now. Well, my one other point is I do, as we look at this, so we have 200 million in possible projects that we propose needing funding. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time the city's approved a non-library millage increase was those bonds you were talking about 25 years ago, right? Was it 2001?
99.
99? Dang.
Year
So
I
yeah.
graduated from college.
Wow, I was still at Troy High then, so. So really, like, as a city, besides the two library millages, well, the 0.7 library millage, the renewal 5 years later, and the 1.1 in 2020, we haven't had any millage increases, which is probably pretty rare with a lot of communities. So that's, I think, something to speak to. It's been 99, what is it now, 25? It's been 26 years since we've approved a non-library increase in funding in the city. So I think we need to talk to that, but there's a lot to think about, a lot to discuss, so I'll leave my thoughts there.
Councilmember Brooks?
Thanks. So I was just going to say, Mark, I know you pointed out about the millages that have passed in other communities, but also looking at how big are those communities, because we have a larger, obviously our population is larger, so it's, it's spreading across a larger tax base as well, so we have to consider all of those things. And I do think, you can consider breaking it up, and I guess that is where it comes down to community engagement, but then there's also the fatigue as well, with multiple bonds, and I think that can get confusing to our residents as well. I think I agree with Dave that ultimately we just have to really engage the community, kind of see where they're at and what they are willing to support. Because I know from our perspective, all of these things are, incredibly important. I think the library has gotten a lot of attention, but it doesn't mean that these other things aren't just as important. And City Hall, I think it'll be like the next library in a couple of years if we don't also address City Hall. So there's just a number of things that maybe the public doesn't, they're not seeing it as often as we are, but it's our job to basically kind of inform them of all these needs that we have if we don't address them sooner rather than later.
I'll come back to Rebecca, but let me go to that.
Yeah, I just also wanted to do the same thing. I'm open to breaking it up, but I also feel that everything above that line 10, we do need to go to the voters, whether it's in one package or in multiple package. And same thing, I believe what we need to communicate is that on a per capita basis, our millage is very low right now. So even though it looks like a lot of increase, it's it's much lower than any of the comparable cities. So that would be one of the things that we need to stress on. And also, I like the presentation today. What we had. Maybe we need to do the same thing with all 10 items or whatever items to have it in the website somewhere available so that people can look at it. At the end of the day, it will come down to community engagement. We need to look at people's appetite for paying 1.5 versus 1. At that point, we need to make a decision whether we draw at that orange line or the green line, or even break it up. And library is absolutely important, but so are everything else above 7. I think I didn't know much about the City Hall until Kurt kind of explained to us that it will become a library in a few years. So, that's our fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that doesn't happen. If we spend $10 million today, we can prevent $50 million of investment in the future. And that's something our residents are very well educated. They understand those things. Once we explain it to them, I believe they will be okay with this. But that's something, it's our decision whether we want to break it down. But I'm open to breaking it down, but I prefer to put everything in one lot. So kind of where I am.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so now I'll share where I'm at and kind of where I need more help. So with breaking it down, I only shared that because that's Troy's history. So our last millage, it was broken down. So it's one election, multiple bonds. So it's very, or millage fits, so very, very clear. So we'll see, that's a great thing to get the engagement on. In terms of, and also to share, to Mark, to your point about how we explored all the options. To be honest, and I think this is just going back to before you were on council as well, we had those summer sessions, what was that, 2 years ago, where almost every week we're in here. Bob, you were doing these great PowerPoints, we were digging in, and what was clear is we need a millage. And I'm going to be quite honest, when it comes to private philanthropies, there is not a single major strategic philanthropy in the United States that funds capital projects. That was decades and decades ago, that Carnegie funded libraries or Kresge funded buildings, like decades and decades ago. So that's not an option, just to take that off the table. In terms, and to explain where I'm at is, I'm comfortable with 5 and up on there. Like, I'm definitely library, public safety, we have to do that. But for me, anything below 5, I need public engagement of some sort. Like, I know that those are important things, from 10 to 5, but I need, especially because we're in a different economic environment. I would even argue we're in a different economic environment than we were in January. You know, I was the one person who actually didn't want to do it in January because I wanted to see how things happened, but I was overruled. So, you know, whether there's some kind of more targeted small polling or really some focus groups, although those are hard, it's hard to make sure you don't just get typical suspects in those, that you actually get scientific focus groups, but I need something to move me from 5, so I'll just share that.
Let me see if Ellen's gonna go before we go
sure.
another run. Go ahead, Councilmember Hoderick.
Thank you, Mayor. This is really good conversation everybody is having. You know, I think the lease back conversation that Councilman Gunn has brought, first of all, I'm thinking if that was something that was easy for us to do, we would have done it. But maybe, and the answer doesn't have to be tonight, but I think to demonstrate that we are trying to think of other options, maybe we could get a little more information back on that. And I appreciate Councilwoman Chamberlain-Craig's reflections on what the philanthropic world is doing. I see the same, and I guess I want to affirm her comments from my experience watching what goes on there. I think one of the things we've touched on and hinted on is our understanding as a council, because we're mired in this isn't coming out of nowhere. These ideas aren't coming out of nowhere. You know, there has been engagement. You know, in the recent year, we've been hearing a lot about the library because that's been the topic before us, rightfully, right? Lesser known is that our city hall, the overheating in our offices last summer displaced employees, and it's just one example of, yes, it's quickly teetering into, I don't even know that it's a couple years down the road that it turns into the library. We have an issue with that building being functional for our employees. We have an issue with that building being able to help us attract and retain the talent we need to serve us. We have an issue with that building actually serving our residents effectively. They're very real issues. Mayor Baker brought up the facilities assessment. You know, what was that, 5-6 years ago? The night that we had the study session on that, we all left as council members wide-eyed about the capital needs for our buildings. The parking lot, you know, chart that the DPW director, Bovensey, put up, boy, that doesn't sound like very much fun and fun what you want to vote for, right, on a bond. But boy, it's critical. We need to do that. That's the curb appeal for our parks. That's maintaining our parks. Which brings me to the drumbeat of over a number of years coming at us has been making sure we are reinvesting back into our parks and recreation. And so the creative idea that's coming to us about the Troy Farm and Safety Town, those aren't just pie in the sky and all of a sudden out of nowhere. That is based on engagement that people are giving us, discussions we're having. I had a number of people reach out to do coffee to say, what happened? Why aren't we as competitive with Rochester and Sterling Heights? Well, we stopped being able to invest in our parks. We have an operating millage cap that the community voted in the mid-2000s. We, you know, the doging that's happening in the federal government, that happened here in the city of Troy in the late 2000s. We cut our staff, we cut programs. So we haven't been investing in a lot of quality of life things, including the library building that needed to be redone all the way back then for years. And so from an engagement perspective, if you're newer to the community or you haven't been paying attention to the fact that this community really hasn't voted in an investment in keeping itself competitive with other communities since 1999. There were 3 proposals then, and in a way, I think that overwhelmed the community, and there was blowback after that. So I think, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff we could be asking for that really, that we could be dreaming and scheming about. That green line and above, to me, is the bare minimum of what we need to be doing to keep Troy competitive, to protect the investments in our homes. And, you know, to split it up suggests that one thing is more important than the other. And to me, it's all critical. It's a big picture critical. Can I be open to a discussion about that based on engagement? Of course. But I think if people were carrying the burden of knowledge of where we're at and what we have not been doing over many, many, many years, they would be right with us. And I think that's the communication engagement piece that is tough to convey, but somehow sharing and understanding of how long it's been since we've locked arms as a whole, you know, residential base to say, here, we want to do this, we want to take advantage of our AAA bond rating, and that we've so fiercely protected, and use it to invest, to protect the investments in our homes. And that's just kind of where I stand, but understanding the history, I don't think people realize we're at a place where we need to really rise up and do, seize this moment. I am watching the politics. I am aware of the tax fatigue. I'm not naive to it, but I'm feeling that we also have a responsibility, like there's the political consideration and then there's just being bold-faced honest with our fellow residents. We need to do this to keep our community competitive. And you know, that's my input at this point. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellen. It's about 7 o'clock. Is it all right if we go 10 more minutes or so? Staff needs a break before the next meeting and everything. What I'm struggling with is January there was consensus to move forward with a bond on this ballot with at least the orange line. And it sounds like we've walked a little bit of that back based on political considerations or whatever's happening. I'm a little concerned that we're taking steps backwards and not, but I'm not so certain that's really where we are. I couldn't get a feel from where everyone's at. It sounds like we're always open to more conversation, more discussion. We also pushed and gave direction to city staff to work really hard and fast to get us to this point now so that we could have a timeline that works, that's not 2 years down the line. And the reason was 2 years down the line, everything will cost more and we lose a whole other year of critical infrastructure needs that are at risk. So I feel a little bit like some on staff may be thinking, you pushed us all to get these projects to you 6 weeks ago, and now you're walking some of them back. And I don't know if we actually are, but my concern about, and I said earlier, I'm at the green line and I'm perfectly comfortable talking to every resident in the city as to why I would support that. Not practically, but I have no problem sharing those thoughts. But we talk about, let's get some more community engagement. That means a lot of different things. I mean, I don't know how we have time to do community engagement on testing out some potential projects if we want to maintain the timeline that we're on. And obviously the meeting doesn't end here and we're done talking about this, and at least I hope not. But we're scheduling a special meeting for our next council meeting for another purpose. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to get back together. And I do think the best conversation among us is in meetings where we're allowed to speak as a group. So the conversation of whether we should break apart the bond, I'll weigh in for 30 seconds on that. I get the appeal of that. I hate to pit fire trucks against the library. I know that it seems like, well, that makes sense. That gives people the options of what they want, and they can pick and choose, but it also could mean that, none of the things get approved that people have been working really hard for and that we know we need, or maybe all of them get approved. It's not, I'm not all doom and gloom, and it's not a terrible idea, but to me, I don't like the idea that, well, we're breaking them apart because we really need this and we maybe need this. I think that's how that reads. I think we really need all of them, and if it's a capital bond for the city of Troy, that's the category that it's in. Yes, it includes the library, it includes all these things, but I have hesitation about breaking them apart like that, and yet I understand why that comes to us. Well, I'll say Mark. If you can find someone to build us a library and lease it back to us, awesome. I don't think it's going to happen, and I appreciate the ingenuity, and I think that's great, and we have talked about alternative sources of funding, and if some of our we don't bring partisanship into here, but there's no grants coming out of Washington, D.C. anytime soon. So we've gotten all that grant money we're going to get. And I'm very grateful for the money we got. I think it was the right thing. But whether it's Lansing or whether it's D.C., there's no grant money coming for a rich city like Troy. I mean, that's the reality of it. And do I think we could raise some private funds? I think we will raise some private funds. Is it going to make a dent that's going to be noticeable? I don't really think so. I mean, and yes, thank you for the nonprofit stuff, and perfectly on point with your Kresge. I would love it if it was 100 years ago and some of these really wealthy families were building civic buildings throughout communities. They're not doing that anymore, right? I mean, but I just don't know where we really go here tonight. I heard most consensus was, well, let's do some more community engagement. I think almost everybody said that, but I don't know if that's clear direction for staff that took our last direction 6 weeks ago to give us this, and I'm just kind of confused. I don't know, Frank, if you want to weigh in.
We had the meeting January 11th, and it seemed like I could be wrong, it seemed like we had 30 days to put all the information together. That's why when we had between the green and orange, you guys needed more information, because at that time we didn't have it. So Kurt and many other staff members really dug in to get that information. Because of the expedited timeline, there is a bunch of stuff Courtney has planned that, with these different assumptions that we spoke about, and be able to continue on that path. But if we have to send out more surveys and different things like that, to get that first chunk out of the way, everything Courtney wants to do with the engagement, even though this is very important, would push our timeline off, where I don't know if we'd make it to the November, ballot with that.
I see Teresa shaking her head.
No, I don't want to wait.
I
want to push the timeline out.
Yeah,
right.
That was my question. I mean, what's our deadline in terms of making a clear decision?
Well, it has to be on the ballot by August, isn't it?
Ballot
Deadline.
language deadline is in August.
August.
So a couple of months before.
But what is that? So I guess the better question, that's the language deadline. What's the deadline for staff, for real, on what you need from us to say, okay, it's these projects and above, go? Tonight was the idea, right?
That would have been great, but,
Right.
Maybe a couple more weeks. As we heard tonight, obviously, conversations are already starting to happen in the community about that there may be a bond proposal and this project versus that project, and so community conversations are going to happen, and we need to at least be in line with those conversations, preferably ahead of those conversations, because a lot of what community engagement is providing information to the public. So you can certainly ask them, would you prefer a project with just streets and fire, or would you be okay if we added City Hall to that? But people may have just general feelings about that, but they don't necessarily know the need for City Hall. And so that's part of the community engagement, is to put that information out there. And then the way I look at it is the public then decides by voting in November. So the longer we have to provide that education, I think the better off the community is to make that decision, and that is entirely to them to make that decision. But it gives us time to hear the questions that are coming from them, answer those questions, employ various strategies. So sending out mailers directly to homes, holding various community engagement sessions at city halls, at parks, at Troy Days, utilizing social media, the local media, all the above. But there needs to be, again, some direction so that context can be provided.
Let me just, it wasn't that what happened in the last 6 weeks is an article came out in Troy Times, and I got more engagement than I was expecting. And from people that, not in my circle, from people that, I'm like, holy mackerel. And so my thought process was, I have seen the library people come in front of us for so long, and that was going to be our focus, I thought. And I'm not saying the other things aren't important, they're very important, but it would really hurt if it went down and the library didn't get funded then. And that's where I'm coming from. It's not that I don't want the other things, but we've heard from these guys for so long, and hearing what I heard from other people, I'm like, holy mackerel, this is not looking good.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm with you, and go ahead. So
Yeah, I mean, I really do think 5 and above will be slam dunks. I mean, again, it's February now, it's 9 months, like a lot of things can happen in 9 months. And I feel like even if like we hit a recession, things get bad, I still think 5 and above would make it. And I know we have till August, July for when we have 5 months for when we really have to make the decision. And so I'm okay with us plowing ahead, above the green line, but with the caveat that if people are really financially or just not there with the other things, like what Mark said, I don't want to sacrifice the library or, 5 years of fire apparatus, which are so expensive. We need to get that handled because there's no question we need that. And then additional money into our streets. I think there's broad support for those things. So 5 and above is like a no-brainer. But the rest, I think, I just need to know where the community's at. Like, I know all these things are important. And I need to understand, too, like, this is a 20-year bond. It's been 26 years since we last went for one. I kind of want to see where we've been those 26 years in spending and to really explain it to people that I want to be set for the next 20 years, too, if we do this. I don't want to have to ask for more. I think if we do a 20-year bond, let's make sure we're covered for 20 years. This plus the capital millage should be enough to cover us for 20 years. Now, all these projects are kind of needs for the next 5. I would like more information what the next 15 years are going to look like once a lot of this stuff is handled, just to make sure we are set for 20 years. That to me is really important. And I know that the bonds aren't going to all come now. They're going to kind of be staggered. Some might be over like 25 years. So I want more information on that before we go beyond 5. But I know we're kind of at a time crunch, so I'm okay like plowing ahead on green and above, but in the end, we might have to cut some things out if the people aren't there. So that's all I'm concerned about. 5 and above we absolutely need that, or our city's gonna not be able to hold up in nearby communities. But beyond that.
All right, why don't we each take 15 to 30 seconds and state where we're at to see if we have some consensus. Does that work? And do you want to start? 'Cause your hand is
Sure,
up. Yeah.
absolutely. So what I'm trying to think is, I'm an economic anthropologist. I look at, what drives human economic behavior. If we hit like a recession or people are losing their jobs, what would still potentially pass? So that's where 5 and above, like I believe in that. If you need my support and you guys are all at 7 and above, I can support that. I'm not sure because we don't know what's gonna happen to the economy. And you know this, Mayor. I told you this at the advance where I was. You know where I'm at. I met Frank 3 weeks ago and I said, look, if the economy tanks, if people are losing their jobs, my neighbors, as they did during COVID, I can't support, I can't. I will be a no vote for that, because I can't do that to people. So it's not a surprise. But yeah, I'm going to do 7 and up.
So you're 7 and up, which was the orange line? Yeah.
Orange, yeah.
Okay.
I'd prefer 5 and up, but.
Right, you'd be willing to go to any. Who wants to go next? Teresa, can you?
I'm fine. I don't mind green and up.
You're green and up?
Yeah, I'm green and up. I think all of these are important. I mean, obviously, if we're getting a lot of negative feedback, maybe we have to pull back, but I think we should push for the green and up.
And David, you were slam dunk 5 and up, but that to me what would you engage on? Green up?
Yeah, we can engage on greening up. Like, I want to see where we're at on that.
All right.
Mayor,
Oh, Ellen, sorry. Yes.
you said I should holler because you would forget I was here. I think we should be engaging on green and up. Councilman Hamilton hit the nail on the head. We're talking about a 20-year view of investing in the community. This sets us up for the next stage of our community. And yes, I'm very worried about what's going to happen with our economy right now and with jobs. That's very much on my mind. But in this moment, I think I like what staff came back with today. It is based on engagement, everything from when we were debating as a community the private-public partnership for the Civic Center that was met with some resistance, but people loved a lot of the ideas within that. All those conversations, what we've engaged on with trails and pathways, with parks, we've gotten input that there's a desire for greening up. And I think that's what we should be engaging on. And yes, of course, if circumstances start pulling people in other directions, we need to take that into account. And we will have time to do that before we would approve ballot language in August. But I'm for greening up.
All right, thank you. Rock?
Yeah, same with me. I would be for green and up. I mean, with that understanding that if economy tanks, something goes wrong, then maybe cut it up at 5. But for now, we'd like to do it green and up.
Okay.
So.
I'm for engagement, green it up. I just didn't know if we were still doing
Engage, green it up, but we're not approving any language
Yeah.
tonight.
Not today.
Yeah.
I'm a little different.
I know.
I'm for the splitting. And I'm for the library and the city hall because I think you explained if it was a library built and then city hall could move into the old library while they remodel it. That would be one for me, and then the others as a second one. I know it's important, but my communication and even with other city officials not in and this economic thing's going on, something tells me $100 million plus is just not gonna go.
Well, let me reframe that for you, rephrase it. I think you're actually for engagement on green it up, but you're gonna take that engagement and see, maybe I just wanna do these projects, and that's what we can use that information.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's.
I'm not asking you to, or anyone to say, hey, we're gonna go for green it up in November. I don't think,
Okay.
we're not there. But, I mean, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be open, if the engagement came back and said, hey, we really like all these, I think, I'd split them up. We might learn that. We may hear big community groups say, I really like these projects, but I'm not so sure about these.
Okay.
And I think that's what the engagement could do.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong on anything I just said, twisting your arm. No, I'm kidding. I'm obviously for green it up, and there's consensus to engage on green it up, but my only concern is with that, and I guess the caveat that pretty much was set around the table, just because we're engaging green it up doesn't mean we're saying in July we want Lori to have language for us that says green it up for a bond. But are you comfortable creating an engagement plan based on that makes sense? I trust your abilities, but is it something you're able to do and then report back to us for us to be able to, well, go ahead.
I also have the timeline, but, so when we're talking engagement, I want to make sure that I'm understanding. Is that sending a survey out, for example, or doing focus groups on everything green up and seeing what the community is comfortable with? Or is it engagement in terms of going ahead with more of our education strategy and informing our community as to the needs of the library and our needs for new fire apparatuses and additional road funding? So there's various levels of community engagement, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding what council's expectations are first.
I think if you surveyed today without education on green and up, people aren't going to know and understand the issue. So you're going to get very different results than if you did it in 2 months after some education, right?
Correct. So in terms of education, I feel comfortable in both. and my department skills to do that, and I already have draft plans together. But I would say having education first is, I think, everyone's best interest.
Yeah.
And I think education on 5 and up is a lower priority, because I think people get that. I really get a sense that all those are pretty straightforward. People get the library, people get the roads, people get fire trucks and police needs. It's in between City Hall, Parks and Rec, that's where we need a little more. So that's where I want to see the
That's
first
where
phase
I-
of
that's
education.
what I-
Yeah.
yeah.
But top 5, I don't think we need.
I don't think you need to educate
Yeah.
heavily on why we need a fire truck. It's not here, but, right, I mean, like that, right. I'm with you on that.
As far as surveys and public engagement, would the opportunity to go to homeowner association meetings and present? Frank's got all the time in the world.
Yeah, so that is actually part of the strategy that I had put together in terms of, for whatever would be on, within the ballot language, is to work with our homeowners associations, to work with our local, civic organizations, try and develop a partnership with the school. So it's very detailed, having booths at, again, Troy Days and various city events, information pamphlets, sending out mailers, putting money behind social media. But a lot of that, again, it's engagement in terms of providing information and education to our community so they truly understand why council is having these discussions and what the city's needs are, not that these just popped up at a meeting one day. And I think that will hopefully be able to answer questions for council down the road, because, we will have town halls and focus groups and whatnot, but there's more of that two-way communication, so we can hear, okay, a large sector of our population doesn't understand why City Hall may be on the ballot. Okay, that's fair. What don't you understand? Let us get that information and now present it to you. Instead of, again, like the mayor had mentioned, maybe sending out a survey in the next couple of weeks where a decent portion of our population isn't really
I think what
aware of
really
these.
sold the library was allowing those tours.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
City Hall
something,
tours.
yeah.
City altars.
Well, and I think, I might be wrong, those in attendance tonight who spoke out probably got some of their questions answered tonight, or at least a better understanding. Janice is saying no. But, well, we'll talk about it, and we do have to go to the other meeting, but I mean, there is, just having the opportunity makes a big difference. The resident groups, and Frank, we talked a little bit about this earlier, we can talk more about it maybe at the next meeting, but having people from our community involved in some kind of, group, at the end of the meeting, it's a bad idea, but like the Financial Ideas team that happened years ago, I think you were involved in that. It was a very effective tool and brought people with various skill sets and ideology and thought process in together to learn about the things that the city was talking about from a financial standpoint. I don't want to get into that right now because I think we're running late as it is, but those can be so valuable because it would allow Janice to have her questions specifically answered at a table as opposed to wanting to jump out of her seat. You're getting picked on, Janice, just you. But so I think there's consensus, to move forward with what we kind of just said. Do you have any questions for us, Frank, that would help clarify anything at the moment?
No, I'll have a meeting probably sometime tomorrow with my staff, go over all these different points and work with Courtney and her communication team to work in the educational and all these things. So we do have more information that we can move on. Like I said earlier, my concern was, the whole timeline is very, very quick. So we have a lot of work for us to do to get all that information and get back to not only council, but to the residents. So there's no confusion. We have, a plan in place. Let's say if you did choose a line, and that's gonna take a lot of time, but now since the line's still kind of fluid, that's just extra work that we will try to get done during that same time frame. So it kind of, thank you, doubled our work.
No problem. You can send HR an email what you did this week, never mind, sorry. But if you could, I want to thank city staff for, truly, I know we had a couple of meetings and talked about it, but you guys have put a lot of work into this over the past 6 weeks since our meeting and then the 30 days prior to the January 11th meeting, I know that it's been all hands on deck working on this. At a time of transition, there's a lot going on, so I know we all appreciate what you've given us so far, and of course, it always breeds more questions, so we keep asking for more. It's because you're so good at providing the answers that it gives us an opportunity for more questions. So look forward to continuing this conversation. I may have some more thoughts, we all may, in the next meeting during council comments, so be listening, and same goes to what I said for the members of the public. Thank you for coming, thank you for speaking, thank you for your emails so far. You can sign up and speak some more if you want the next meeting if you have some more questions that we can think about. No other business stated, so we're adjourned.
I need to grab something to eat.
Yeah, please, sorry.
This is the closest we've come.